Haul the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello, and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today, before we start the show, I would like to bring up some business things that have kind of been on my mind so that you can know where to get more Where Am I to Go. First off, I'd like to talk about the Facebook page at Where Am I to Go podcast. It's on Facebook, and we've been posting some wonderful pictures of some of the places that we've been and some of the adventures that we've had. Not everything that we go and do is made into a podcast, and so we take pictures at different places and post those pictures so that you guys can enjoy some of the different places we've been. Also, I really am interested in listener feedback. I have an email address at whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear some of the listeners' comments and some of their ideas of places that might be interesting to visit and go and do. Today we are at the Tucson Rodeo Parade Museum, and I'm here with Stan. I have no idea anything about the Tucson Rodeo Parade or anything, but Stan's going to fill me in. Just from walking into this museum, it is unbelievable. There looks like there's a lot of buggies, a lot of displays, a lot of history. So welcome to the podcast, Stan.
Thank you. Glad to be here. One other thing is that we're only open from November through the first weekend in April. So always check our website, TucsonRodeoParade.org.
Well, I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, I am too. Makes two of us.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about the parade?
Alrighty, the Tucson Rodeo Parade started in 1925 to actually promote the rodeo that was going to happen in the same year. There was a gentleman by the name of Leighton Kramer who decided that he was going to do a fundraiser for the University of Arizona polo team.
Polo team?
For a polo team that they had. And the polo field is currently where the University of Arizona Medical Center is right now, on Campbell.
Okay, so they're not playing polo anymore.
They're not playing polo there anymore. And in fact, Quonset Huts, that was Polo Village, where a lot of married couples lived during the early years of the University of Arizona, has been bulldozed also. It's all underneath the medical center now. So what they did was he decided to do a fundraiser, and he went to the mayor and city council and said, we would like to have a rodeo. As a fundraiser, mayor and city council looked at him like he was silly, because to have a rodeo in Tucson was sort of like us watching somebody do a Word document, okay?
Okay, right.
Because we had over 90 working ranches around Tucson, and it was just a common thing. It wasn't something outstanding.
Every morning you went out to get on your horse, you had a rodeo.
Basically, exactly.
Okay,
exactly.
Yeah, that's the way a lot of those ranches were.
Exactly, depending on what spooked the horse on that given day. So what he ended up doing was convincing the mayor and city council to go ahead and have a rodeo, and then he says to promote it, he was going to bring in all of these people from not only participants in the rodeo itself, but also people that were like the indigenous tribes from the Apache, the Tohono the Yaquis, and he also brought in several different Hispanic groups, brought some in from Mexico, the Charros and that. So it was more of a show of Tucson's culture is what the parade was, to show off the heritage and culture of Tucson, the diversity of it. And it still holds true to this day, 97 years later. That's what we like to do, is we like to promote the diversity of Tucson.
And do you still have the rodeo going?
The rodeo still takes place. It's going to take place here in another week.
So, in another week?
Yes, so a week from this Saturday it starts, and it's runs for a week. There's 2 Saturdays, or Saturday and Sunday, for qualifications, and then they run what they call slack during the middle of the week, and then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and Sunday leads up to the finals being on Sunday. Our parade takes place traditionally on Thursday.
Okay.
And what's unique about our parade is that all of the schools in Tucson surrounding area let their students out of school. It's a holiday, sort of like some places they have the first day of hunting.
Right.
There's no school. In Tucson, it's the rodeo parade and the day after the rodeo parade. So they get out Thursday and Friday for that. And
okay. Now, this podcast is not going to come out before your parade, unfortunately.
Right.
So we do it. So what dates are we talking?
We always look at the last full week of February, and that's traditionally when it is. So the dates obviously flex, and that's why I didn't give you a date.
So this is something to plan for next year.
Exactly, and we're actually planning for our 100th anniversary coming up in 3 years.
Really?
So, and we're already planning for that.
Wow.
So, and planning for both the rodeo and the parade committee are two separate entities. We're two different organizations because it's too much for any one organization. It's also been that way ever since the beginning.
Okay.
The Chamber of Commerce put on the parade, and Leighton Kramer put on the rodeo.
Okay.
And we'll see some pictures a little bit later on about what it looked like back then.
Okay, so now do you have the Mexican riders and the Indian riders or Native American riders and all of that?
We have them in the parade, yes.
Yeah, what about in the rodeo?
In the rodeo itself, it isn't. It's a PRCA.
Okay, so it just has the standard events.
It has the standard events.
I know that in Sheridan, Wyoming, close to where I live, they have rodeo that it has a lot of the indigenous people or Native Americans or whatever we need to call them. Has a lot of those, and supposedly it's an outrageous rodeo, and I've never managed to make it, but I guess that the events and everything are a lot different than your standard PRCA rodeo.
Right, and before PRCA came along, they had some very unique events, such as wild horse races, where you had to they turned wild horses loose inside this arena, which was actually built in the mid-30s. And still being used today. They turned wild horses loose, and you had to go and jump on one and then try to ride it around the arena and see how long you could stay on it. They also had one thing that I wish, in a way, that they still had, because it'd be pretty comical, and that was a jackrabbit roping contest.
Where
they released 50 jackrabbits in the arena, and you had to actually go and lasso a jackrabbit. And
that would take some skill.
It would, and I think the crowd would really enjoy it if the PRCA would sanction an event like that. But so we're pretty much the rodeo committee is pretty much basically they host the PRCA to come in and run the event.
Okay, and is it a big rodeo like the Cheyenne Frontier Days or the Pendleton Roundup? Or
yes,
it's on that scale.
We're the largest. We're the first outdoor rodeo of the season.
Okay.
Of the rodeo season because of our weather. Although a couple of years ago we had snow that happened the night before, and so all the cowboys who were pretty muddy, they just called it a snowdeo instead of a rodeo, and they said, "Nah, this is real rodeo, and this not like inside these arenas and that, which is so sterile and so small." Because as we get out to the arena itself, if you want to take a look at it later, we can look at it. It's a large arena, and that's what they like about it, because it is a very large arena, and so it actually has to be restricted down. They bring in portable fencing for the bull riding so that they can contain, because it is a large arena.
Okay. Well, now let's get back to the parade now that I've covered everything that's not in your committee.
Exactly. Switching over to the parade committee. Yes, we still, going along with your question about the rodeo with the different groups that are in it, we still have the Tohono O'odham Reservation that sends their representatives, their governing officials and dancers, etc., musicians. The Pasco Yaqui tribe, another tribe that's around here, does that also. At times we have the Apache that come in. We have the Buffalo Soldiers, which were stationed down south of here. The Black Infantry and Cavalry Group that was stationed down in Fort Huachuca. They participate in it. In fact, we have some harness right close to where we're standing here that were actually used by the Buffalo Soldiers and auctioned by Fort Huachuca, and we acquired the bid by, it cost us a whole $1.
Oh, really?
Well, they couldn't afford to give, they're not allowed to give away public things. So they opened the auction. We bid on it for $1 because we normally don't buy items because we're a 501c3 nonprofit.
Right.
And as you can see, there's some brass buttons up on that one up there that is from the Buffalo Soldiers. Along with that, we acquired a chuck wagon that they use also.
Oh, really?
So, so we've got that. And last weekend we had a group of Buffalo Soldiers that were here, and they take pride in all this stuff, and they're happy that we have it and we're preserving it for them also.
Cool. Yeah, no, you've got what, probably 15 harness sets here?
At least, right
15,
there.
16?
Yes. And this is only part of it. We've got a whole another room that's filled with, I think there's 8 more of these carts like this of harness.
Wow. And it's all displayed on a really nice rack. You've got your hames and your collars and all the lines and everything all displayed.
Right.
Really nice looking harness sets.
Well, the parade used to be downtown.
Okay.
And so all of this had to be, the reason why they're on these carts is they had to roll these out, load them up onto a big trailer, and then haul them down. Then we took all of the wagons, had to roll them all the way down basically where 22nd Street and the freeway is, just east of the freeway, in a big park there. And that's where the staging was. And then people had to spend the night there to make sure nothing got vandalized, to take care of it. And then everybody brought their horses in. And then if you had a horse and you wanted to pull a wagon, we just, hooked you up and says, we've got the harness, you hook up, and then good luck driving through the parade. We have no clue what your horse is like, whether it likes it or not, okay?
But did you have a lot of runaways?
Oh, there was periodically some incidences, yes, periodically.
Wow, periodically, yeah.
Okay, so,
but did anybody get run over by the horses periodically?
Usually not. But if you saw, which is kind of ironic because the reason why we moved it from downtown out to here is because the crowds were so big that people were literally close enough to where they could touch the entries. And then plus the sound of like the drums going through from the marching bands, spooking the horses and various things like that.
Just putting a wagon behind a horse that's not really broke to drive.
Exactly.
The noise back there a lot of times will keep them spooked.
Yes.
I've been on a runaway team one time, and I equate it to sitting inside of a 69 Chevelle with a 454 and a blower on it, no brakes and no steering wheel, and the gas pedal to the floor.
Yes.
And that's how much control you have. It's a little bit on the terrifying side.
Right. So they moved it up here to the south side of town, where we've got wider streets. There's a lot of our rules are actually City of Tucson ordinances.
Okay.
So the City of Tucson comes along, they paint a red stripe on the curb all the way on both sides of the street. Nobody can step across that, and Tucson Police Department helps us with that. We have about 300 volunteers on parade day too that help assist not only in that and helping people, but also help them find the porta potties, or maybe a lost child and things like that. So. And
are you a little bit more particular with your horses nowadays?
We use a horse contractor now, yes, and that's also for insurance reasons also. So by using a horse contractor, when you rent a small buggy, you not only get the buggy, but you also get the horse, the harness, the driver, a walker that walks alongside the horse also for safety, and insurance that goes along with that also.
So
and,
in other words,
the feed and everything's wrapped into that.
So in other words, you just told me they took all the fun out of your parade.
No, they didn't. It's just that we don't have a rodeo during the parade, and that we don't want to compete against the rodeo. Already, no, everything we do is for safety's sake. In fact, as we get going through, we'll probably come across one of the gentlemen that's with the wagon rentals, and some of the wheels you'll see are pretty greasy right now because we just got done going through every wagon, greasing them, and making sure they're safetied and things like that. So.
Well, and just a quick walk through here.
Sure.
How many wagons do you have in here?
In our museum, we have just shy of 100.
Okay, and when I say wagons, you have a few wagons. Almost everything in here is doctor's buggies, surreys,
everything down
every kind of passenger type buggy that you can imagine. I think I've seen. And they're all in really nice painted shape. If anybody is interested at all in seeing wagons and horse-drawn, not equipment, but horse-drawn transportation, I would say this is probably one of the best displays I've ever seen.
We've got everything from a little $25 little buggy here, that little pony cart.
Now, when you say $25, you're talking out of the Sears Roebuck
Sears
catalog.
Roebuck, that's what I was just going to say. This little buggy here was a kit that you could get out of a Sears Roebuck catalog, and I just closed the page, but for $25 you could buy this little buggy.
And that was 1920?
That was in what are we looking at here? Somewhere back in that area.
Right.
You might say. 1909.
1909. Okay, and this
catalog.
one here was probably set up more for a Shetland pony or something.
Yeah, pretty much, and because nowadays everybody's into the biggest horse. It's more of a chest thumping kind of thing. Look at me with the biggest horse kind of thing.
And I'm glad that they are, because otherwise the draft horses would all be gone because they're too danged expensive to feed.
Exactly. But
so that preservation is an important part of that.
Right. And that's what our problem is, that we can't run a lot of these in our parade because of the size of the horses. And so the shafts here are too narrow, and we don't want them rubbing against the horse. Again, we not only look at the safety of the passengers, we're looking at the safety of the animals too. And we have a vet that's on premises, that's on the parade route. We've got an ambulance in case an animal decides to start getting sore or something happens. We can move that animal safely to an ambulance and get that there under the care of the vets. And so again, it takes it off of our responsibility into somebody who actually knows what they're doing.
Cool.
So anyway.
And then over here on the other side, we've got a really nice saddle display. You've got you've got side saddles, you've got McClellans, you've got modern roping saddles.
We've got show saddles and all the way up to the pack saddles up in the back.
That is.
All the way down
you've
to
even got
saddles.
some ox yokes.
Yokes, right? Because
Now, do they have oxen in your parade?
sometimes we do. I don't think there's any this year, but we've had some in recent past, and there for a while we'll even come across an oxen cart as we go through the museum. That used to run in the parade a lot.
That is so cool. Okay, so where are you wanting to take us from
Well,
here?
we're just going to kind of roam through here. We've got a blacksmith shop because a blacksmith was kind of like your, we might say, visit Tucson or whatever,
Right.
where you'd come riding into town and say, maybe you didn't even need anything repaired. You just say, where can I go for a hot meal? Where can I go to stay cheap? And they'll say, oh, you can go over to John Smith over there. If you don't have money for the particular hotel, go stay with John Smith because he needs some work done around the yard.
Right.
And then his wife will fix you a good meal in the morning.
Well, the blacksmith was probably one of the most important people in the community back in that day, because your horses needed shod, your buggies needed fixed, and they were the ones that did all of that work.
Exactly. So the next thing we have is the Stork's Nest. The Stork's Nest was a birthing center here in Tucson. There was 3 rooms: the yellow, the pink, and the blue room. And for about $30, a woman could go there, give birth. She'd be taken care of for the week. It was all inclusive. There was midwives, and then there was a doctor to check out both that and the child. That is a birthing chair from the, and it looks more like a prehistoric dentist chair, I know. And but yeah, that's and these signatures are up here are actual people that were born in the Stork's Nest.
Oh, really?
And so we try to take their picture and do various things like that.
And so when did this go out of business?
It was 1946. Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, it was a lady's. This lady just had an idea of having some place for women to go and give birth as opposed to being in the house. As you can see, it started in 1921.
And this is a really nice display. They've got a medicine cabinet in there. They've got a real nice bed, some baby clothes, a set of crutches, birthing chair, like you said, that looks a lot like a dental chair, all except it's got stirrups on it.
Not
like
stirrups.
what you think for horses, but anyway. And there's some buggies in here and some chairs. It's a really nice little display.
Right. And all of the medical display parts of it has been on loan to us from the University of Arizona College of Pharmacy Museum.
Okay.
So,
wow.
We also have buggies out here that were used in the movie Oklahoma.
Okay.
We have 3 series here. It was actually filmed in southern Arizona here, both down by Sonoyta and also down by Tubac. And one little story about the movie Oklahoma is the beginning scene when they're riding along in the Surrey and they're talking about the corn is as high as an elephant's eye. They actually had to rewrite the lyrics for that because the movie industry got a hold of the University of Arizona College of Agriculture to plant corn. And the movie got delayed a little bit and we had really good weather. So the original lyrics was the corn is knee high by the 4th of July.
Right.
Well, the corn stalks ended up being over 8 feet tall by the time they got around to filming it. And so that didn't work. So they had to and so what they did is they planted all the corn in 3-pound coffee cans here in Tucson and then trucked it down and made up a makeshift cornfield. And that's how it's the movie magic, like they still do today.
Right.
You know, now they use CGI. They would have just put CGI in there. And back then it was actually
corn that was 8 foot tall.
Yeah.
Wow. And these buggies are so nicely restored.
Well, thank you. Yes.
The colors on them are nice. Right. And the pen striping, they're beautiful pieces.
We have a couple gentlemen that you'll see as we go through that are working on a park drag, which is a elite English British coach that was used back in the day. So the saloon was a very a popular place in town. It wasn't only a drinking establishment, it was also a lot of times on Sundays used as a church. The Catholic religion was fairly established here, thanks to Father Keno coming up through. And so, but when it came to Protestant and synagogues, a lot of times they would have it, Sunday mornings, they would have their services here in the saloon because it was large enough to hold people. Okay.
It wasn't because the guys were still there from the night before and their wives could come meet up and they'd still go to church.
I won't argue with that. That might be too. You never know. It was also used a lot of times as a classroom to teach adult education, so that people could start learning how to read or write or do some math and that. And a lot of times, because we didn't have a lot of tall trees here, they would pop out a center board out of the ceiling and use a rafter there, and this would be a courthouse, and then they'd string them up right there in the in the saloon. So.
So it was a hanging parlor,
yeah,
too.
and you didn't have to build
a place to hang out.
Yeah, exactly, literally,
There you
exactly.
go. Okay.
With your toes a little bit off the ground.
Okay. And they've got a nice little bar room scene here. They've got the bar, they've got a bartender, and another guy standing here at the cash register. A couple of ladies, one of them holding a guitar, another one sitting by a piano. Looks like a player piano. Right. It's a nice little display. Now, this room that we're in, he's got buggies going all the way down the middle of this room, and it's probably 25 foot wide.
Right.
And coming down each side, he's got little display rooms with different things, like the maternity room and the saloon. And we're headed on down. We've got the parade boss here. Right.
This is some of the awards. Actually, they're plaques and that we've received through the years. The Kurt Sullivan Sweepstakes Award for the parade. Royal Irving Memorial Award, that's kind of faded by the wayside. He was one of the parade committee members back in the day, and that's.
Now, this Kurt Sullivan Award is really interesting. You've got a longhorn cow or bull, and it's all covered with
turquoise.
Turquoise,
right?
Yes.
Yeah, the skull part of it is covered with turquoise, and it's Kurt Sullivan's daughter actually is on the parade committee right now, and she became the first female chairman of the rodeo parade committee.
Okay.
Which was breaking the ice, and she was the first female on the committee, and then eventually first female that was the chairman of the committee.
Okay.
Seal Peterson was famous in Tucson, famous with the ladies. She had a very high-end dress shop.
Okay.
And so my mom, I was born and raised in Tucson, and my mom, whenever we'd have to go to a wedding and she was asked to be an important part of the wedding, the women would all go to Seal Peterson and purchase their dresses from there. It was very high end.
Okay, and in this minuet or whatever you want to call it,
vignette or whatever,
you've got some dresses, you've got a little feathered hat, you've got a lady working at a sewing machine, another lady that looks like she's trying on some high-end clothes, some boots, and
dress
just
forms,
a lot of the, I would say, 1920s, maybe a little bit earlier fashion going on in here.
Right. And she ran a store downtown, and eventually at Elkhorn Mall, which has since been bulldozed. The mall has been bulldozed, and it's got a couple other big box stores there now. But everything that you see in this vignette is from Seal Peterson. From her collection. She was a grand marshal of our parade one time because she was a very influential person in Tucson, and so.
I'm assuming Tucson was a lot smaller then, just by looking at some of the pictures and some of that.
Tucson's really boomed, especially in the past 30 years. It's really taken off and really expanded. And that. I'm going to back up and talk about the one little buggy here.
Okay, we're looking at kind of a doctor's buggy with a top over the top. It's got a dashboard that is woven red and black and painted kind of green with a red pen striping.
Right. And so this was given, Levi Manning was the mayor of Tucson.
Okay.
And there's a big building that's down, us locals call it Snob Hollow because it's where all the rich lived.
Okay.
Down off of the freeway and just west of downtown, basically. And there's the Manning House that's still there. It's now owned by a nonprofit medical group. And so he gave this buggy to his child for his 13th birthday, to his son for his 13th birthday. So it's sort of like giving your son a Corvette.
Right.
And saying, here, have at it, son.
Oh, it's a beautiful piece.
It is. So.
Wow. So did he give his son a horse too? Or?
I imagine so. This is a Studebaker, actually. This is a Studebaker showpiece. So it's a little different green. It's almost like an olive drab kind of green with a cream seats on it, and it's got a nickel silver trim on it, accents on it. And there was a gentleman who came through who was actually from the Studebaker Museum back in Indiana, and he pointed out that this is a showpiece, and how you can tell is because of the nickel silver. He goes, otherwise it would be black metal that they would use back then or painted. And this, just like vehicles today, vehicles back then like to show off things and get you to buy things. So this front seat here actually rotates around and slides up against the dash.
Oh, really?
And this is where your children would sit. So if you're driving back there and you've got your lines going up to the harness, yeah, they didn't think too much about safety back then, okay? Except for that, you could keep an eye on the kid,
right?
Already with your eyeballs. That seat also folds forward, and if you wanted to, this would fold up against the dash to give you some more knee room and converts it into a little pickup truck.
Wow.
So they thought of things back then. One of the other Surreys back over here has what they call a jump seat. The back seat actually, the front seat folds up, and then you take both seats and you jump them forwards, and they don't slide forwards. They literally go up in this mechanism and move forwards, and then that Surrey can be made into a little pickup truck.
Wow, that is really cool. Now, for people that don't realize it, Studebaker is an old company.
Right.
And everybody, well, a lot of people are familiar with the Studebaker automobiles of the, well, they were kind of in the business until 1966. But before that, they were building carriages, buggies, and the such. Right. In fact, the buggy that carried President Lincoln to Ford's Theater was a Studebaker.
Right, and they started in 1853 with 3 employees, and they made 3 buggies.
Okay.
So that's when they started. I can remember those 3s. 1853, 3 employees, three buggies they made in that first year. And then they expanded into not only making automobiles, but they made military vehicles.
Right.
If you could have a chance to get to the Studebaker Museum in Indiana, it's
I've been there.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive, isn't it? It's impressive.
It's very impressive.
Now, I think one thing that we need to talk about as we're talking about a different museum is we're not the how do you put it? We're not the clean, sterile kind of museum. We're more of this is what we got. This is it's more walk up and touch it, type of thing. Take photos if you want to. And
that's really cool. I like museums that are like that.
We only have 2 vehicles that are roped off. One's being repaired, and the other one is. I'll talk about when we get there.
Okay.
Behind you is El Conquistador Hotel. It's right where the mall is, where Seal Peterson had. So you know what the history of that is. It got tore down. But it was one of the top hotels here in Tucson. The dome that's on top, when they tore it down, the dome ended up going up on North Oracle Road at Casablanca Shopping Center. So it's still there.
So it's still around.
The front, which you can't see behind the palm trees there too well, that's actually an entryway into a housing development on the north side of town to a fairly nice neighborhood, Rancho Sin Vacas. And then what you're looking at here is the actual front desk. Actual key box, there's safe, some bullfighting posters from Nogales that they've flown there, and then the little candle sconces that they used to have when they first opened.
Okay.
Wow. Because of the lack of electricity in the hallways and that, they actually, and plus the ambiance of candles was pretty back then.
Right.
On the other side of the this hall, we've got an assay office, E.A. Jacobs, who moved here to do assaying for the Ajo mine, which is about 100 and some odd miles to the west of here.
Okay.
He actually went out there, didn't like it, so he moved back to where the city was, and then made them bring all of their ore here for assaying. Plus there was more mines that were south of Tucson, so he had more of a variety of mines here. So
there's a really cool sign up there that says Pima County, which is where Tucson is, produced in 1941 metals valued at $18 million. Many small mines need capital to reopen. Grub stake, a good miner, and both make money. Investigate first.
Right.
Yep.
Yeah. So then we've got a barber shop, and this, when Mr. Perry went out of business, he offered it to the Parade Museum, and he says, I'll leave the door unlocked on Sunday morning, go down and get it. The parade committee goes down on Sunday morning, and the door was locked, so they jimmy it open, start bringing stuff out. Tucson Police Department shows up and says, what are you guys doing? They went, well, Mr. Perry gave us his clothes. He goes, no, Mr. Perry's is another block down, so they had to put everything back. So there's stories, and all of these buggies, if only they could talk, and tell their stories, So
I'm sure that they heard plenty of stories going down the trail.
Right. So as you can see, it says Municipal Airport, Tucson, November 20th, 1919. This was actually the first municipal airport in the United States.
Oh, really?
What happened was Pancho Villa was raiding Columbus, New Mexico, which was right on the border. The Army Air Corps had a base there.
Okay.
Levi Manning, thinking back to that carriage, was mayor at the time, and he owned this property. And he was a big real estate investor in that, so he owned quite a bit of property around here, including half of the Rincon Mountains to the east here. There's a Manning camp, which you can still get with the National Park Service and go up there and stay in the Manning cabin.
Okay.
Anyways, so he found out about this thing going on over there in Columbus, New Mexico, and he says, "Oh, I've got property over in Tucson. You're 60 miles away from the Mexican border. You don't have to worry about Pancho Villa's guys coming through and slicing the fabric on your biplanes. You're far enough away." So they went, "Oh, that's a great idea." So meanwhile, he gets a hold, once he got that firmed up, he gets a hold of the city council and says, "Hey, I've got this property down here, and the Army Air Corps is interested in it. I'll sell you the property so you can take it over." And they went, "Okay." So if you think, yeah, okay. Anyways, read between the lines.
Insider trading? No.
Yeah. So anyways, this hangar that we're about ready to go into is one of the original hangars. There was two of them that were brought up from Nogales as hangars.
Really?
They were factory buildings that they brought up as hangars. And actually the Adobe...
So this is actually a hangar from 1919?
Yes. And this here was added on in the 1920s as they backed the biplanes in so they could serve them in all these little portals that you might say, these vignettes and all these. And then
I didn't realize we were standing in an old hangar.
That's right. And this was all dirt floor filled with horse manure, because this is where the city of Tucson then, after the Air Force came around, they moved to Davis-Monthan. And then the airport, which was known as Mays Field, ended up moving to two other locations before they ended up where they are now.
Okay.
Still as a municipal airport. So, anyways, so what happened was this city had this, so they ended up making this into their stables, this Adobe building into stables, because they still had horse-drawn fire wagons, they still had horse-drawn garbage trucks, they had their mounted police yet and things like that. So each of these then turned into stables. Okay, and then so that's how that got evolved. And then it became the Pima County Fairgrounds, and in 1963 it was given to the parade committee for storage, and then in 1965 the parade committee decided, you know what, we've got all this stuff, why don't we try showing it off a little bit. So,
that explains this building so much more. Walking down through here, I was wondering, how come you have all the little rooms off to the side and the big wide area coming in and stuff?
Right.
And the thing that's interesting is this part that was built in 1925 is all wood.
Right.
Whereas the one that was built in 1919 is all metal structure.
Right. So if you look, when we get around outside, you'll see that it's made out of adobe. And the adobe was actually constructed right here on the premises. It wasn't brought in.
Okay.
And adobe is a brick that's made out of just mud and straw and everything. And then I'll show you a part where they repaired it, and I'll tell you a story about that too.
Okay.
So we're now walking into the hangar. This has some of our other vignettes that we have on display. The whole story about, there's a slideshow here that talks about the things like not only the Pony Express, but the overland stage route and things like that, the importance of the overland stage routes. Okay. And a lot of models that people have donated to us through the years.
Now, were there a lot of the big trails that came through here, like the Santa Fe Trail?
Well, you had the Butterfield Trail, but then there's, they just used, that was only active for a few years, but for the most part, we didn't have like the Santa Fe Trail and those, they're
but yet you have Tombstone, which was a major cowboy hangout. I don't really know the whole story of Tombstone.
Well, you'll have to go visit.
That's only, what, 40 miles south of here?
Yeah, it's about an hour's drive south of here. It's real pretty down there.
We're planning on heading down to Tombstone and taking a look around when we get through here in Tucson. But you guys have so many museums here in Tucson, and I'm scheduled with several podcasts, so I'm excited because you guys are kind of what I would almost consider a museum
Mecca.
Capital.
Right,
Mecca. Yeah,
yes,
I like the word Mecca much better.
Right.
Because there's so much going on here, and it's not real well advertised.
Right, and we're working on that. I'm actually on the board of the Southern Arizona Attractions Alliance, and we promote a passport that you can buy for $25. It's also an app. You can get either a 3-day, 7-day, or the full year passport for $25. And it's got over 100 locations that you can go to, and usually a lot of them are buy one, get one free as far as admissions to various, and it pays for itself quickly.
Oh, it would.
So.
And like I said, we've got, I think I've got 7 museums to do here in Tucson that are, I like to say oddball, but I don't really like to say oddball. They're different. You know, it's not your art museum or whatever. It's like the buggy museum, the parade museum. Who else has a parade museum?
Right. And actually, we're looking at changing the name because we have so much more than people come and go. Oh, I expected just to see a couple things about a parade. I didn't know you had 4 buildings worth of
buggies and
of
stuff,
everything.
yeah.
History. So this little miniature display here was actually found in the basement of the Children's Museum when they were cleaning it out, and we put it up as a display. And then one of the local news reporters came by and he brought his sons through, and he goes, "Oh, that's pretty amazing. I love that," and the kids loved it too. And so we said, "We don't know who Paul and Wilma are." He goes, "Well, we'll find out." So that evening on the news, he was talking about it. He has phone out, he was videotaping. He did a little article at the end of the newscast, but we don't know who Paul and Wilma is. The next day, he got a phone call saying, "Oh yeah, that's our parents, and we've got more of the."
Oh, really?
Back in the garage if you want more of it. So they brought it, so we ended up putting out the whole display. Wilma did all of the figurines.
Okay.
It's all out of clay. And she also did let me flip on the lights in there.
We've got a whole town sitting over here with a general store, a saloon, Wells Fargo Overland Stage building, a house, a barn. There's a cowboy riding a bucking horse. There's a stagecoach with some horses. There's what, probably 25 figurines here of people.
Least. And if you look inside the building, the general store, you're going to see she's got bottles, she's got hats, she put everything inside. She furnished everything. The cantina, there's that. You look in the saloon, there's shot glasses, there's everything. You've got the drunk falling out, off his chair, everything. You got the showgirls. It's, they even have a sow nursing her piglets over there.
Oh, really?
So it's
this is really a neat little deal here. Wow. How cool.
So we have a small indigenous display here, and one of my goals is to keep bringing in different organizations. I'm working with the Chinese Cultural Center now to revamp their display, and we'll see that a little bit later. And I'm also working, reaching out to the Pascua Yaqui and to the Tohono O'odham Nation to try to make this, and the Apache peoples, all to try to make this a little bit more presentable than what it is. I've only got what I inherited, which is a lot.
Well, and you've got some really neat displays here. He's got some different weavings that have all the different plants that they use for the coloring of their fabrics or their fibers in order to do the weavings. A map up here of the different indigenous tribes and their regions. Needle and thread. What are the round bones that are in there? What were those? Are those beads? Earrings?
I believe they're
necklaces?
just part of a necklace.
Okay. They've got some small arrowheads. These rings are probably 1.5 inches in diameter with a little bump on top. I'm not sure what kind of bone they are.
Right, I'm not either.
With a hole in it.
And that's why I want to bring them in to actually sit down and, figure things out a little bit more detail. I'd like to learn from them.
Right.
That's the thing. So.
And some really neat grindstones.
Right. These are
not your normal bowl-shaped grindstones. There's some here that have
These
really
are all been found
shapes.
on ranches south of here. They're actually called metates, and then the grindstone that you hold is called a mano, which means hand, and so that's the hand part. And you grind the mesquite beans or corn in there. Usually the mesquite beans, they made the mesquite flour out of the mesquite beans.
Oh, really? Have you ever tried that?
It's very good. It's very good. Yeah, I love mesquite bread. And muffins.
I've never even heard of that. I'd be really interested in trying it.
Well, you're here in Tucson. Go down onto the down by Santa Vera Mission. I think the co-op might be open. I'm not sure because of the COVID closures, whether they've reopened or not. But they've got several things that baked items too. And around town, just Google mesquite.
Okay,
breads and
I'm going to have to try that because that sounds really interesting.
It is. So and then. A little bit of the music from back in the era, the Victrolas that you crank up, and some of the old radios, and we always tell students, this is your MP3 players from back then.
Yeah. A little bit harder to carry around.
Exactly. And then we have a Wells Fargo display with actual strong boxes and that. We've got an actual Wells Fargo shotgun. So when somebody yells shotgun, when they want to go riding shotgun, it's because of the shotgun that's there. It's a shorter 12 gauge. It's a coach gun, and so
and it was made for sitting in the passenger seat.
Right, you sat there
protecting your
driver
cargo as you were
cargo.
going.
Yes.
Because back in the day, Wells Fargo, they used to carry lots of coin and that type of stuff for payrolls.
Right.
And that's why you always had stagecoach robberies or even train robberies.
Just like
the same thing.
The strong box, you know.
With they weren't carrying a little credit card.
No, they weren't.
It was hard.
Right. They didn't do electronic transfers back then.
Right. And you got a flag that looks like it's huge.
It was, and it was on display on the north end of our Adobe hangar at one time. It's 15 feet by 20 feet.
Okay, and it's all folded up.
Folded up.
And that size folded up in a triangle that's probably...
about 18 high by, 36
I'll bet it's probably 36 by 36. You can only see 5 stars.
Right. So behind you, we've got a display of buckboards.
Okay,
we're just looking at the wall side. If you turn around, the first buckboard that we have here, that gray one, was actually used in several movies out at Old Tucson. And the last time it was used in a movie was actually for a TV show for High Chaparral.
Okay.
And what looks like dirt on there is what they call movie patina. They paint the dirt on there, and we're going to see another stagecoach that's like that also, where they made it look dirty so they didn't have to keep throwing mud down and stuff.
Okay.
So.
Now, when he just referred to Old Tucson, there's a place. Is it in Saguaro National Park or
Saguaro? It's just south of Saguaro National Park.
Okay, but you kind of stay in the campground that's right there by it, and it's an Old West town that they have set up with all kinds of Old West type buildings, and a lot of things were filmed there. There was a lot of John Wayne movies filmed there. They did some Little House on the Prairie stuff there. And they used to hold big festivals. From what I understand, it's not really up and running anymore.
It isn't. It closed about a little over a year ago. And they were going to announce by June 1st of last year who the new management company was, and that hasn't come out yet. They have repaved the parking lot and put new roofs on everything, but they haven't said who's done it. So everything that was there is basically out of there now. It's just shells, shell buildings that are there right now. And but we hope that it gets running again. It was built for the movie set for the movie Arizona.
Okay.
Back in the day. In fact, that large freight wagon right there was actually used in the filming of Arizona back in the day. And so, anyways, it was built for that. Then it kind of fell into disrepair. The Tucson Junior Chamber of Commerce took it over, started fixing it up, and then a gentleman by the name of Bob Shelton took it over and then made it into what it is today. Well, it was up until it closed. Kind of a theme park, and they still did a lot of filming there. They had a massive fire there that burned down the sound stage, and about 2/3 of the old Tucson sets and wardrobes and stuff like that, unfortunately, went with it.
Right. And when I was out there, we went to a steampunk festival
out there
a couple different times.
Right.
But they'd have guys falling off the top of two-story buildings and all kinds of things. Yeah. It was really a lot of fun. I was sorry to hear that it was closed.
I think the last big film that was filmed out there was the Three Amigos.
Oh, okay.
So that hotel is still up there where they're up there dancing. That. And then their subset is over just this side of Benson, and it's called Mescal. And that's where a lot of filming took place too. And it's open right now for tours at $10 a person to go through that. And they give guided tours, and so that hasn't even come up on any of my searches of things to do in Tucson. They just recently, September 1st is the first weekend in September, whenever that was they finally opened it up to where it was safe enough to where general public could walk around, because it was basically falling apart. And that the unique thing about it is that every building except for one of them is all movable. They're all so that they can rearrange their town. So supposedly the Quick and the Dead and Tombstone kind of overlapped a little bit, and they had to kind of rearrange for the two movies, and so each one had 12 hours to film. Really? So it was, they've got all kinds of cool stories about that back there.
I'll have to go check that one out, since it's something new.
It is. And so a lot of the legends, a lot of the background actors that you see, in all the old westerns, they hang out there yet.
Still?
Still, they call them the legends, and they go out there on the weekends and just hang out. And they're what they call themselves streetscape. Because they're dressed in character, and it's really fun, to see.
This is a really unique buggy.
Yeah, it's an Amish buckboard is what it is. And so, again, you drive from the back.
Oh, you drive. Oh,
yeah.
no, isn't this interesting?
Yeah.
I thought that the driver sat in the front and they put the ladies in the back.
No, yeah.
But
So
the back's got a cover on it.
Right,
the front
exactly.
seat's wide open.
Right.
Huh. Okay.
And as we come around, we've got a little buggy. It's like a doctor's buggy, but it's got the convertible skis that you pop the wheels off and you slide those little skis on there, and we call it your first original ATV.
Right.
And so that's kind of unique.
Yeah, it's kind of like those mat tracks that they put
Right.
on trucks now.
Exactly.
Now it's got the skis. Now I bet this was used a lot in Tucson. I see that you've got 3 or 4 sleds here.
We use sleighs all the time here.
I bet you do.
Little sarcasm there.
It
right.
seems a little
So-
bit humorous to see sleighs here in
Yeah,
Tucson.
so we have 3 sleighs here. One of them is actually from Michigan. It's for hauling lumber, and they used to stack it really high, like 12 feet high, with logs and that. And I could never figure out how they got the 2 horses to pull it. And so one gentleman was coming through here who was up there in years, and he goes, "Oh, I used to be a water boy for that." I'm like, "Okay, tell me what a water boy is." Well, along the forest roads, my brother and I used to get paid to dump water in the tracks of it, and it formed ice then. So then when the horses got the thing going, it was basically like ice skates on it, because there's metal runners on it that make it slide easier.
And as long as you kept it in the tracks, the horses would still be able to get their traction.
Exactly.
How cool is that? I never would have thought that.
They were ingenious back
thought
then.
of
You know, we think about technology today. They thought of everything back in the day. I mean,
Well,
there's so much that has converted from the 1800 buggies, just a basic buggy, to today's automobile.
Right.
That's still being used.
And it definitely brings to mind the thought, necessity's the mother of invention.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Necessity. So you look at this freight wagon here. We're looking at about a 5 foot tall wheel
At
here.
least, yeah.
This is actually the front part. There's actually a trailer that's larger than this that we have over in another building because it doesn't fit in here. And the wheels are over 6 feet tall.
Really?
So the front wheels are 5 feet tall. So you put 2 of these together, and if you think back to like the borax.
Right. We were just in Death Valley and saw that train.
So this is kind of like it, but this ran in southern Arizona here between the mines, hauling it from the ore from the towns out to the railroad tracks.
Do you know how many tons it would carry at a time?
I don't know right off the top of my head, but I think there's a plaque on the other side that goes into more
The thing
detail.
that I find interesting with these is the way that they hook these up, from what I understand, is they would always leave like a foot of slack in the chain. And so they'd get that first one rolling, and then it would jar that second one in, and then it would start moving forward. And that's the way that they were able to get them moving. And once they got them moving, they were able to keep them there. But getting them from dead stop, it was pretty rough on the horses.
And then you look at the blacksmithing. Everything is all blacksmith. It's not like they went to their local dealership and bought some stuff. And the simplicity of opening up the back gate by just moving a ring. And that opens up, just
it's kind of like the way tire chains. Well, I'm down here in Tucson again. Maybe you guys don't know how that works, but the tire chains.
I used them once, but not in Arizona. So it's just simplicity, at its best. It's and that's so. As we move on through, we've got a small. This is a 3/4 scale prairie schooner that's actually on loan to us, and sometimes it rolls in parade. It hasn't for a while, but it just kind of gives an idea of.
And a prairie schooner, for those that aren't familiar, or what everybody calls a covered wagon.
Exactly. So we'll slide on this direction here for a second. And then, so this is from Sunset Dairy. This is actually a milk wagon.
I love this.
The milkman actually stood up in there. And you got to think back in the day, they didn't have refrigerators. They had ice boxes. One of the prizes for the first rodeo parade was a 75-pound block of ice.
Was it really?
Yes, and 100 pounds of potatoes.
I'll bet ice was kind of... Where did you get your ice in Tucson?
You didn't until the railroad came in 1880.
Okay, I was going to say, because you guys don't have any ponds that freeze over.
No, the closest we got is Mount Lemon. And they'd have to
bring it down
from Wagons.
Yeah. And the way that they used to do it, I don't know if we've covered this in any other podcasts or anything, but you used to have to put up ice, and then you'd put it in an ice house. And the ice house would usually have walls that were about 14 inches thick, stuffed with sawdust. The floor was stuffed with sawdust. The top was stuffed with sawdust. And then they'd pack that thing full of ice. and it would keep for, well, in the northern states, it would keep all summer long, and then you'd be out with your ice saw out on the lake cutting blocks of ice again to put up for the summer.
Yeah.
And it was really quite the deal. And
so down here where it's 115 degrees in the summertime, 110, 115.
Right.
Yeah, we didn't have ice in the summertime.
No ice. In the summertime.
We had an ice house and that was later on when they would actually bring ice in with the railroad. And there was a gentleman who had started producing ice prior to the train coming, like in the 1870s. But really, it was more for Snob Hollow.
Okay.
For the people down there. It wasn't for the general. Basically, you harvested your meat the day you ate it the day you harvested it.
Right.
And so, but same thing with the milk. You had to deliver, basically the day, that. And so we've got a lot of the glass milk.
You probably drank
cartons.
a lot of warm milk.
Probably.
Because you wouldn't have been able to cool it down even.
Right. So.
Did they use much in the way of underground cooling?
No, believe it or not.
Spring houses or anything like that?
No, we don't have spring houses.
Okay.
Yeah. I have a well where I live, and my water table is like about 350 feet.
Okay.
My well is 500 feet
That's
deep.
a long way to spring.
Yeah, it's a long way to spring. I mean, there's springs up in the mountains and that, but not right in town here.
Okay.
So, but we're looking at a wall here that this is a collection of charro, which is Mexican rodeo.
Okay.
That was at the University of Arizona College of the School of Photography had it, and
there's some neat pictures
Center for
here.
Creative Photography. Yeah, and it really shows the Mexican culture at its best and how different their rodeo is compared to ours. A lot of the trick roping that they do, the dances, the women play a major part in the rodeo, not just barrel racing. There's a lot of different events that take place, and that the women actually have their own quadrille team. Riding bulls is different. They turn loose, jump on the thing. Again, chasing the wild horses, trying to lasso wild horses and that. So this diorama here basically shows off a lot of history, from the Mexican culture down here.
I love watching some of the Mexican rodeo stuff. That's the reason I was asking you if it happened here on YouTube. That smoking glove event.
Right,
Have you ever seen that?
Yeah,
those
where
guys
they take
are
off,
holding a glove and the rope's running through their glove and the smoke's just pouring out like somebody burning rubber on the street.
Exactly.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was one of those that I saw, and the guy didn't have any fingers when the rope got through smoke, and it was just like, whoa.
Yeah, and then they have not only, like we have the calf roping, and that, or the team roping. They have what they call, is it steer tripping or calf tripping? So they not only have to lasso it, but then they have to put another loop down, and it actually trips.
Oh, really?
It grabs the legs of the calf or steer, and it falls over. So it's a double kind of, more challenging event.
I'm going to have to check out that one on YouTube because I haven't seen that event yet.
Right. We've got a beer wagon that is on loan to us also, and it's for sale. The only problem with this beer wagon is that it's empty. There's no beer in it.
What good's it?
I know. It's good to look at. So we have 3 circus wagons here. One of them's a calliope. We have another small one that was used, but we think with children, maybe dressed as clowns that came out. And then this one here that's now converted into a ticket wagon. Pre-internet, they would take this wagon and haul it downtown and then sell tickets to the rodeo.
Okay.
And then they took it out to El Con Mall and used it for that. Of course, with the internet now, you just go online to TucsonRodeoParade.org and order your tickets.
Now, this ticket wagon's like what you would normally think of a freight wagon that's got a total box around it with a small door to get in, and it's got some really neat rodeo paintings. Clown in a barrel with a bull on the side of it, and a guy riding a bull.
And this is what it looked like when it got donated to us. And
wow!
So. This Mrs. Thompson comes through every now and then, once a year, to check on her wagon. These were deserted, actually, or abandoned on her dad's ranch back in the day. It was kind of a circus that kind of went belly up, and they just left them out there. And
really?
So they were very...
The calliope, too?
The calliope, too, and it was all pretty well taken over by pack rats and that. So the parade committee made it look like a calliope. They took out the original calliope, made it look, because it was... It was all rusted. Yeah, rusted and corroded out. So, but it was a nice little show wagon to run into the thing. And actually, I have an MP3 player that usually is playing.
I was going to say, I'm a little bit disappointed. I was hoping that you'd get up there and play the Calliope for me.
You know, it's actually got a keyboard in there, and then it's got a cassette deck in there. If you peek up in there,
oh yeah,
it's got a cassette deck where they used to actually play with with the speaker. They is underneath what looks like the smokestack up there for the steam, and that it was actually. There's a big speaker up in there that could play Calliope music and that. So it looked like the guy was playing. But I went upgraded to MP3 players. I just don't have it playing today. Okay. Normally when we're open, it's playing.
Wow. Yeah, the Calliope is an interesting instrument. I've always been fascinated by them.
I was able to. I was on a riverboat. Actually, I took 3 riverboats up. They're all part of the Delta Queen series, and it was. I was on the Delta Queen, the Mississippi Queen, and the American Queen, which is this big, massive boat. Had a chance to play a Calliope on each one of those, and they were all weird to play because there's such a delay. You push the key, but then you have to wait for the steam to
hit the whistle.
To hit the whistle of that, and they have to burp it before they start. And that's what
really?
They have to lean on all of the keys with their arm straight across, and it has to pump all of the air out. And then once they start hearing all of the whistles firing up, then they take their arms off, and now they have to quickly be able to play it, as long as there's steam there, So, but anyway.
Wow, I never realized that they were that complicated of a
device.
I just thought, yeah.
So
that is so interesting.
Here we're restoring. Actually, Andy and Bill here that we see. You're lucky to catch them. They're in the process of restoring this park drag, and I don't know if you want to talk to them a little about what goes into restoration of these at all.
You guys want to talk a little bit about restoration?
Well, you can show you the pictures of what it looked like before we started.
But yeah,
if you guys, I'd be interested in seeing the pictures. But if you guys want to talk a little bit about the restoration, let me take the little microphone off of him and.
We're not talkers.
Well, how about for just a minute? So you got this this buggy in a pretty dilapidated state, or?
Well, they'd been working on it a number of times. Trying to find a good old picture here from it. They purchased it in 1942 from Detroit, Michigan.
Okay.
And so we think it's probably connected with the Ford family.
Oh.
The coach was made in 1835 in England.
Really?
Birmingham, England, and we found the stampings on the axle, on the metal on the axle.
So they had to have brought that over by ship.
Yes.
Wow.
And the park drags were used primarily exclusively by the rich families, and they used it to go to picnics or to go to the horse races or whatever, but it was primarily used most of the time in the back. They had it for a picnic basket. There were some of them that were exclusive. They actually had wine racks with wine glasses hanging in it.
Wow.
So,
and they called it a park drag?
Park drag.
Okay, and so it was for going to park on Sunday afternoon and having your picnic.
Correct. And they usually drove them with the 4 horses.
Oh, really?
Hand.
They did a 4-horse team?
Yes.
Wow.
So this is kind of what it looked like.
Okay,
when they originally got it.
It looks like you have your driver sitting up front in the exposed air, and then you can put the family inside of the enclosed part in the back.
But there was also then 3 seats also up on top in the back that they could go, so they could have like 12 or 14 people could ride on one of those.
It looks kind of like a miniature stagecoach in some ways.
Although most of the stagecoaches, they didn't always ride in the inside.
Right.
Some of them, they didn't always have all the seats on top either like that, the extra seats.
Right. And did this one have the leather springs?
This does not have the leather springs. It's got very heavy-duty metal springs on it.
Okay. So the body doesn't sit in that leather cradle.
Stagecoach. Here you can kind of see a little bit of the spring on this picture here.
Okay.
Kind of see that's where we sanded it down, the different colors that it's been over the years.
It's been green and yellow and brown
So,
wow.
So
that's pretty cool.
We'll see its sister when we get into another barn. You're going to see one just like this.
That's all restored?
Yes.
Cool.
So let's see here. But it's the seats are totally done. Trying to find where we started. I had a picture of the door. The doors had holes in them.
Like for handles or for bullets?
No, it was a big hole somebody put in it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
by mistake.
Okay.
I think Stan put the hole in there so I could have something to do.
Huh.
course,
Boy, it looks like you had a lot of work looking at these pictures.
Well, I take a lot of pictures on the restoring it because we take it totally apart.
Right.
Almost every piece is off, and I want to know how to get it back on.
That's probably a good way to do it.
Oh, good. I got in a hurry going through, so I missed the one with the hole in it.
Well, that's okay.
But even like the brass trim, like if you take a look at the door, the brass trim on the door over there, it was painted over also. I took it home.
See any of the brass on it.
I took it home, stripped all of the paint. I think it had 3 different layers of different color paint. The last one was black on there, and was able to get it off. And then I put it on a buffing wheel and sprayed it with clear lacquer, so it stays looking nice and pretty in brass on the doors now.
Wow. A lot of work.
On the black, we just painted all this black stuff, so it might be a little bit damp. So.
Wow.
How come I can't find a picture, Stan?
Because you lost it?
No, because you're looking for it. And you know it's going to be the last one you look for.
Here it is.
There it is. Oh, man. Yeah, it looks like somebody put a hammer through it.
Yeah, well, there's it is. Right there on the far side there is that door now.
Okay.
The brown on there, that's where the hole was here.
That had to have been fun to patch in there.
Yeah, well, it's a whole new board on there.
Oh, you put a whole new veneer?
Yeah, a whole new veneer on it.
Okay.
So,
that makes sense. So how long you been doing the restoration on these things?
We've been working on this space for a little over 2 years.
Really?
But I'm part-time. I'm from Minnesota.
Okay.
I come down here. Bill is from
That's a long ways to drive to work.
Yeah. And but it's I can't snowboard come down here, so I kind of gets me out of the wife's hair.
Right.
I come over here during the morning.
She probably appreciates that.
Well, yeah, but she doesn't appreciate not having a vehicle. So we've negotiated. I get it in the morning. She gets it in the afternoon.
Okay.
So
well.
It's a fun piece to work at, like when you can find on the axles where it came from 1835 out of Birmingham, England. And we researched on Google.
Right.
And there actually was the company in Birmingham, England. They did make coaches.
Wow.
It doesn't have quite the history of like the Brewster coaches. I don't know if Stan's talked about any of those.
We haven't got there yet.
But they've got the real history because each piece on a Brewster has a serial number.
Really?
So, well, not necessarily every piece, but a big majority of the pieces all have it on there. So.
Okay.
So that's in our last building that we'll do.
Well, hey, thank you very much. I appreciate you talking, even though you said you don't.
I don't.
Yeah, and before we leave and go to the next building, building 3 of the 4, you might notice the Cisco Kid horse trailer here.
Okay.
From Duncan Ronaldo. About a month ago, I got this phone call. Kind of interesting. It says, "Hi, I understand you have my dad's horse trailer." Well, I'm thinking rodeo stuff. I'm like, well, you might want to contact the rodeo committee. He goes, no, it's supposed to be in your museum. I went, okay, the only one I could think of is this. And I says, who am I speaking with? He goes, Richard Ronaldo. And I'm like, related to Duncan? He goes, yeah, that was my dad. That's why I say, you got my dad's horse trailers yet? I'm like, sure do. He goes, I'm coming in from California. I'm going to try to meet you, sometime around 3:30 today. And it ended up being a little bit later because of the delay. But, he ended up spending about 2 hours, talking about, the life and times of his dad. And so that was really cool. And then he came back the next day. He and his wife came back the next day and, spent another couple hours with us talking about that. And he's actually got another trailer similar to this, with a matching 1960 Chrysler Imperial.
Oh, really?
With an oval steering wheel that was custom built for him. And he's was looking to see if there was a place in here that he could donate it, to match.
Did you find a place to move?
We're working on. He's coming down for the parade, and we're going to be talking a little bit more. We're trying to figure out
how cool is that.
And so usually we try to stay away from motorized because we are a non-motorized parade. And as you can see, everything is spoke wheels. We don't have anything with. Like you'll see like a hay ride kind of wagon, flatbed. So anyways, so the other horse trailer that's like this, actually one part is for his horse Diablo, which it found out, or Diablo 2 I think is what he called it. That horse actually didn't like to ride forwards, would only back into the horse trailer, would always look out and like to look backwards. So it's kind of interesting. And then the other half of the horse trailer was actually his dressing room and wardrobe up near the front. So since he was no longer making television shows and movies, he went on a circuit and did appearances all over And so that's
and we're looking at kind of a teal blue, I would say,
right.
2-horse trailer. It looks pretty much just like any 2-horse trailer, other than it's got Duncan Ronaldo, the Cisco Kid, and his movie horse, Diablo, and a picture of him and Diablo. The saddle, I'm assuming, it comes out a little saddle rack in the front.
And actually, what was interesting is I posted a picture on Facebook with, Richard and I standing in front of this horse trailer, and a couple days later, I get a phone call from a lady. She goes, "Hey, I painted that."
Oh, really?
And I'm like, "Oh, really?" She goes, "Yeah," and she told me her name. She says, "Yeah, I'm, Dana Rigas, and I painted it. Can I come down and take a picture of it?" I'm like, "Sure, come on down and tell me some more stories."
Yeah, no doubt. And that's got to be so much fun being a curator and having somebody come back to one of your pieces and giving you the history of it.
History is really odd, though, because I had a cameraman that came in about 3 or 4 years ago, and he goes, "Oh, no, not the Cisco Kid." He goes, "I worked over in L.A., filming TV shows and movies. We hated to do the Cisco Kid because he was like 4'11". We had to bend over all the time, and our backs ached and that." So I asked Richard, I said, "So how small was your dad?" He goes, "He was 5'7". I went, "Wait a minute, okay, now, somebody's not," he goes, and Richard's almost 6 feet tall. He goes, I almost could look eye to eye with my dad. And then my dad had lifts in his boots also. Okay, so this camera guy who's claiming to be a cameraman, so this, I was up in Canada, and this old First Peoples gentleman, I was in a museum, and I was asking about something, and somebody started questioning him on it, and he had the perfect response to this person that was nagging him about what he was saying wasn't true about his own people. And he says, "We all have 2 eyes, we have lenses in those eyes, and we all see differently between, through those lenses.
Right.
So no 2 people see the same thing identically alike. So thank you for, giving me what you see through your lenses. I'm telling you what I see through mine." And he turns and walks away. I went, "Yeah, that's a polite way." And it's true, because we had Wyatt Earp in here. He was actually the great-grandnephew of Wyatt Earp. Okay, last November, talking about, and his wife, who's now passed, put together a docudrama, a one-man docudrama. And it's all about the life and times of Wyatt Earp. Well, when it comes down to the OK Corral, there's 3 different stories from the 3 Earp brothers, because their mother insisted that as they traveled, that every week they sent home a letter about what, their adventures, because they didn't always hang together. And so Morgan, Virgil, and Wyatt all sent letters home to Mom about the shootout at the OK Corral, and he goes, every one of those letters, all 3 of those letters, you'd swear they were in a different town, under different circumstances, and different people were there.
Wow.
And these are 3 brothers, with different impressions. So what is history?
Right.
History is only what you see through your eyes, and I see through mine. So it's,
It is interesting.
It is.
And then you have, I shouldn't even say this, but then you have the people that intentionally warp it to their intent, to their agenda.
Okay, we're going to walk over to another barn here quickly.
Okay.
And we're going to walk across the courtyard here.
And we're walking across the courtyard with a fence that's probably 20 feet tall, made with log slabs, like from a log mill.
Right, and they came from on top of Mount Lemmon. We call it our stockade. And what it originally represents is when Tucson started in 1775, the Presidio, or fort, was moved from Tubac all the way up here to Tucson, to the Presidio that's downtown right now, and slabs of wood was actually resembling the Presidio wall back in 1775 when the Spaniards came here. They were directed by King Charles III to move the fort from Tubac up to Tucson. Back then it was called Tucson, which means base of the Black Mountain, by the Tohono. And so when they got up here to the little mission, the father says, "Oh, you need to move across the river and up on the hill, and that's where you're going to set up your fort." So they harvested all of the cottonwood trees, put them up there, and they were basically, the fort was designed to protect the O'odham from the Apache raids.
Okay.
And so what they did was they had a problem with the stockade, and as you could see, there was gaps in the wood, and so the Apache could shoot between the logs. So then they started building an adobe wall around the Presidio.
Okay.
That's another interesting place you may want to visit downtown.
The Presidio.
The Presidio. So
we just walked into this other building.
Right.
And this one's full of, instead of being passenger carriages and stuff. This one looks like it's mostly freight wagons, chuck wagons, and that type of stuff.
Yeah, so we've got everything from this low boy right here was by the Tucson Gas, Electric, and Light and Power Company.
Okay.
And the reason why it's built so low is so that they could load gas pipes onto it easily, or power poles onto it without having to lift them so high.
Okay.
It's got the steel wheels with steel spokes, so the spokes wouldn't break. Wow. So,
and it's probably, what, 15 foot long?
Right, by about 4 wide. It's almost the same size as a farm wagon. And all the farm wagons are basically the same width. The undercarriage has something, it's got the front wheels and the back wheels, those parts of it, but then they've got this long, it's like a 3x3 or 4x4 reach that goes where they can adjust the size of for the box. And that. So these are all rolling into parade that we see here. These are all farm wagons along here. And then everything on your right here, if you heard of Linda Ronstadt, her grandfather, Fred Ronstadt, was a wagon builder here in Tucson.
Oh, really?
And he didn't mass produce like Studebaker. He would, if you wanted a wagon, you'd come to me and say, hi, I need a wagon. And I'd say, well, who's going to be using it? And he'd say, well, she's going to be using it, more than me. So Fred Ronstadt would say, you stay here, we're going to talk, okay? And you'd talk to the person that was actually driving it. All I want from you is your money.
Right.
But I'm talking to the driver. Okay. And so everything is custom built accordingly.
And how many of his wagons do you have here?
We've got 5. We got 5 in here.
5 of them.
We've got 5 of them in here.
Wow. So, and how many did he build? Lots and lots of wagons?
At one time, he was the largest custom wagon builder west of the Mississippi.
Really? Did he have a lot of employees? Or?
He had a 3-story building downtown.
Oh, really?
And when I was a little kid, I remember Ronstadt's was the place to go. It was like the hardware store to go if you needed, like my dad needed a special part for his well.
Right.
Okay, so we went to Ronstadt's because they were the only ones that had it. Okay, but I remember going upstairs, and I can't remember why, but on the very top floor, I just remember smelling like very musty, like leather and stuff. But he had wagon wheels all over the wall. He had shafts. He had tongues, wagon parts. There was ranchers that were still using wagons. They could go there and buy a spare wheel if they needed it.
Really?
So, and I'm talking about the 1960s, early 1960s.
Wow.
So this is like your semi. This one here, this was built by Albert Steinfeld, for Albert Steinfeld rather. And this is basically used to haul a lot of goods to possibly Nogales or to Benson or outlying areas. That's your semi truck from back in the day.
And this one's all made of oak, it looks like.
Yes.
Very nice looking wagon. It's got benches going right down the middle so you can put people on both sides.
Yeah.
I guess that's probably an add-on for the parade.
That's why the same thing with all of our farm wagons. They have bench seats, basically a board across, and that's so that we can rent them for the parade. Okay. All of these will roll in the parade.
Okay, and so when you rent these, you rent it to like the 4-H club or something like that?
Yeah, like this one here is Boot Barn. You can see Boot Barn is on this one. They brought stuff in already. Okay. And they'll start having names, La Poderosa radio station.
I was wondering what that was, because one of them was a church wagon.
Right, exactly.
It doesn't look like something you'd haul people to church in. But.
Well, no, they rented it and they're going to decorate it.
Okay,
so,
got it.
And this here is a cedar. And this is kind of unique too, because it's you filled a bin. We're looking at a big International Harvester bin here with a McCormick cedar attached to it. So what happens? You filled it up with the seed. There's a chain drive that hooks to the back wheel here.
Okay.
That drives then this mechanism that then spins the cedar around and feeds the seed and spreads the seed.
Spreads the seed.
Without it.
So it's kind of like a big wagon fertilizer spreader that you run in your yard.
Right. Yeah.
It throws the little grass seeds out or the fertilizer over your yard.
Yeah.
It's just a lot bigger.
This is more
for
for like wheat, where you don't have to worry about rows. You
Uh-huh.
just seed it more for like grass and things like that. We did have that manure spreader. We got a little off on the park drag talking about the restoration back then. But there was a manure spreader there and a corn binder that we have in there.
There was also a chuck wagon that was
wagon.
all set up that we skipped over.
Yeah.
That's
on loan to us, and that actually still runs on. He uses that for cattle drives still.
Oh, does he?
Yeah. Prior to COVID, he was out running 3 or 4 cattle drives a year.
Okay.
With that. It's got everything, including a shaving mug.
I was going to say, those chuck wagons were pretty amazing pieces of equipment and so crucial to the cattle drives.
Right, exactly. So these are your little runabout, little hacks that you have.
You got one of the old hose wagons for the fire department.
The hose reel. Yeah, we've got
hand pulled.
Right. We actually have 2 hose reels. The very first fire wagon is not here right now. It's being serviced because the Tucson Fire Department actually pulls these through the parade.
Oh, do they?
And the fire wagon, they usually have like a chief on it or whatever, and they're all dressed in the old style firemen's costumes too.
The old leather helmets
and all? The good old sights, yes.
Wow.
And that's our grease wagon. That's getting ready to be pulled out of here pretty soon. It's got all of the wrenches on the side. It's got another thing is that when you build wagons back in the day, or they built them back in the day, they didn't use custom. I mean, you couldn't just go and buy your nuts, the wheel nuts and stuff like that. Every wagon maker wanted to have proprietary nuts and bolts and that. So you can't say, oh, I just lost a bolt out of this little Surrey. I'm going to run down to Ace and or wherever and get a 1/4 bolt. No, it might be a 1/4 bolt, but it might, the pitch might be, they might have only 18 threads per inch, or maybe it's 24 threads per inch. Nothing was standardized, so that you had to go back to the wagon maker to buy the
well, and I'm sure
parts.
a lot of the bits and pieces were all custom made at the blacksmith shop right there at the foundry.
Right, exactly. Yeah. And then if you notice, there's a whole bunch of different wrenches, and a lot of those wrenches are custom built because the original wrenches have been lost. So you've got like tubular steel where you have to still stick shims in there to make it fit enough to make it work.
And now you take that along with you for in case a wagon breaks down on the parade, or
no? This is just used for servicing the wagons in here. They just got done going through here and servicing all these wagons.
Look at these ones.
Yeah, so we've got some Surreys. We've got a delivery wagon. We got a railroad delivery wagon out of Nogales. We have a Teamster wagon there. A couple of Surreys here. There's a wagonette. This one here looks really nice because it's relatively new. We got it in 2019. One of our members had passed away, left money towards purchasing a new carriage for the parade, and this one even has this one's street legal, and so it's got hydraulic brakes, and it also has brake lights in the back, so you put a 12-volt battery back there, so you can run it at night if you wanted to.
And this one's got velvet seats. I mean, it's beautiful. It's one of those ones that
and it's all built from Amish parts. So what happens is with this, it's a husband and wife team that build these. She sketches out her design, then they jump in their dually and with a big 5th wheel flatbed on the back, and then they head back east and they pick up parts, at the different Amish communities, and then they bring it back to the state of Washington, and then they assemble it.
Okay.
And, so paint it and assemble it.
Wow.
So it is beautiful. Then right next to it, we've got this other one here. This is actually a Colorado sightseer that was used to actually haul people. This is your tour bus, you might say, for up in the Rocky Mountains. It was used up in the Rocky Mountain National Park, and they would actually give like 2 and 3 day tours. So you throw your bedroll underneath there, and you just traveled, during the summertime. Yeah, it wasn't very good at winter, I don't think.
Well, no, the wind would blow right through the open sides.
Exactly, it's very open. It's like the Oklahoma Surrey, but with extra seats, and it's jacked up a little bit higher with better suspension. So now we're into the park drag or the tally hole, or the like we were looking at over there that is being restored. So this is its sister. So when that one over there gets done, it's going to look like this.
And this one's painted yellow and blue. Again, it has the seats up on top. It's got it looks a lot like a squared off stagecoach.
It does.
Stagecoaches were round, but this one here's a lot more boxy or square. It's got seats on top of where the passengers would the high dollar passengers would ride.
The gentlemen and the kids rode on top, and the women rode inside. And you could fit 6 to 8 women inside.
Wow, it's just a really neat looking coach.
Yeah, and you talked about the backside. With the I mentioned about sometimes it's an ice box, sometimes there's a wine cooler in that. With the wine racks. And in the front here is where you had drawers. You can see where the drawers would go in there. That would slide out for other items that you want to take on your picnic.
Yeah, just load it up. I mean, you could load up half the church on a Sunday drive and go have a picnic in the park. How cool is that? And
behind you, we've got the City of Tucson jail wagon.
Is that an original?
It's an original. What it originally was, where it originally started was to haul prisoners from the Yuma Territorial Prison
Okay.
to the brand new Florence Prison, which is old and dilapidated nowadays.
Okay.
But it was used for that, and they transported the prisoners in the middle of summertime.
Okay.
Okay, so going across Gila Bend when it was 115, 120 degrees outside. The first night they actually handcuffed the prisoners to the wheels, not to the spokes, but to the metal part of it. Okay, so they couldn't escape. They couldn't saw through with their handcuffs. So if you can imagine having 6 guys tied to each of the 4 wheels, you know.
It had to have been comfortable sleeping arrangement.
Yeah, well, it really, well, the first night wasn't too good. After the first night, they no longer handcuffed and they no longer shackled the prisoners. And the reason for that, now you're out in the middle of nowhere, and where are you going to escape to? It's suicide, okay?
Right.
Where if you stayed with the jail wagon, there was a water wagon and a chuck wagon that was also traveling with you. So you had food and water, and so it wasn't until you started getting close to the Florence, town where they started shackling you back up again.
And I also noticed that it's painted a nice flat black for your riding temperature comfort in that 115 degrees.
It really helps absorbing the heat, the sun, to keep you nice and warm. Again, sort of like our museum, the summertime provides us a very good heater.
Yes.
And then eventually the city of Tucson acquired it, and it was their jail wagon that they used here. And so it still rolls. We've got on this side, we have mud wagons.
Okay, tell me about mud wagons.
A mud wagon is different than what you would see like with the Wells Fargo coach. Notice that they're very open.
Okay.
They don't have doors on like the Tally-Ho does. It's kind of closed. Reason for that is when it's hot outside, you don't want to be enclosed inside, plus with all the dust inside, it was always open. In fact, even the Butterfield would switch when they got from Texas, started coming this direction, they'd switch to mud wagons from the Concord style, like the Wells Fargo coaches, because it's too hot inside and it's too dusty inside. So this way, the air could flow through. They got their name mud wagon because if they did go through anything that was wet, mud would hook onto the wheels and fling it up and into the people that were riding in the wagon. So that one went between Reno, Nevada, and Pyramid, Nevada. It ran a mail route and stage line for that. And so this one here was in over 40 movies at Old Tucson. We talked about movie patina with that buckboard. And this one here, what looks dirty, is all painted on there. Now these mud wagons are the ones we talked about, the suspension. You asked about the leather straps. So you can see there on the Tally-Ho, the big metal, big oversized. It almost looks like it belongs on a semi. The leaf springs. We do have, this one has been restored, and when they restored it, they used conveyor belt instead of leather straps. Okay.
It probably is a little bit more durable in the long run.
Probably, but then again, you take this one, and
that one's got the leather.
It's got the original leather from the 1800s on it.
Wow.
And the idea with these, having the leather straps, is as they were going along the sides of hills, the philosophy was that by it rolling or moving just forwards and backwards and not side to side, they wouldn't fall over the cliff. Okay. It kept you going almost like a gyroscope, going forwards and backwards, everybody riding. And it's actually a fairly smooth riding vehicle. It's a big rocking chair, a family-sized rocking chair on leather straps. And it's just held on with a couple U-bolts. You can see this. There's a U-bolt there and a U-bolt there. It's a big rocking chair.
That is so cool. Back again to some of the ways that they thought to overcome some of the problems that they had. It's just ingenious.
Right. We talked about the Buffalo Soldiers over in the other room. This is the chuck wagon that was used at Camp Little. It went between Camp Little and Fort Huachuca for the Buffalo Soldiers. And if
anybody doesn't understand what Buffalo Soldiers were, they had segregated military, and you had your white soldiers and you had your black soldiers, and the black soldiers were referred to as Buffalo Soldiers.
Right. They were after the Civil War. They fought, for the Union, basically. But they were their own. They had several units of infantry and also cavalry. So they were their own unit. They got their term Buffalo Soldier from the native people. Said that with their curly hair, they looked like buffaloes. And they hung on to that name. It wasn't derogatory. In fact, when we had the Buffalo Soldiers here a couple days ago,
they use it with pride.
It's a big pride thing for them. They're proud of being known as a Buffalo Soldier. It's their identity in that. So if you can see here, it still has some of the army green underneath it. But again, the movies came along and painted it a brown because they thought it looked better. So for their movie, these are like your city buses here. Your public conveyance. They're just small little wagons. Is what they are. That carry people. Little wagonettes. You can tell that it's designed for city because it has rubber tires instead of the flat metal tires on it. And Tucson at one time had a city ordinance that said between 9 p.m. and 7 a.m. you could not ride a buggy through downtown Tucson or a wagon through downtown Tucson with metal tires because it made too much noise. And they highly encouraged that you have rubber boots on your horses too, so they don't make so much noise in between the buildings.
Really?
Yeah, the hotels lobbied for that. So
now he said that these are smaller wagons. They're actually fairly good sized. They probably haul the smaller one here would probably haul what, 6 passengers?
Exactly.
And the other one would haul 9. Yeah. So it's not like a doctor's buggy, smaller buggy.
They're about 10 feet tall. With the top of the canopy is about 10 feet tall. In fact, the seats are probably 4.5 feet, maybe 5 feet off 5 feet off the ground. You had to climb up into them. It wasn't like you're climbing into a limousine.
And the thing that's kind of another interesting point that I've noticed is you have your old buggies from the early 1800s, and 2 people could probably sit in those comfortably in 1850, 1890. Now you'd be hard pressed to get 2 people to be able to sit in those buggies because the seats are only 3 foot wide or so, and 2 normal sized people nowadays just can't do it. It's not comfortable.
Yeah, people aren't as petite as they were back then. This is the garbage truck that I was telling you about that had to be hauled. It's actually a belly dump or wagon that came out of south of Tucson down here, south of Patagonia, which is a town about an hour south of here. And it's unique because it is a belly dump. You think of that as modern dump trucks now. What we mean by belly dump is that it has a closed bottom, but the driver can pull a lever that releases these chains, and the bottom opens up and just dumps everything out the belly. And then he can sit here with this other lever and start ratcheting, and as he ratchets, the chains tighten up and roll back up onto the spindles again, and it closes back up again. He goes, gets another load of ore, comes back over, pulls the lever, and dumps it out the belly.
Yeah, just like the modern day belly dump trucks that you see working on the highway or whatever else. I did not realize that they had belly dumps back in those periods of time. That's just a fascinating piece of machinery here.
So the city of Tucson actually acquired this from the mining communities as copper was kind of dwindling down, moving more towards the large open pits and that. So the early 1900s, they acquired this and used this to pick up garbage through downtown Tucson. And the dump was actually right where Congress and Interstate 10 is right now, downtown. So and that was the big. I remember as a kid driving through there and seeing sparkly, it was the glass that was broke there, but the ground was always all sparkly there, and that. So, but yeah, and then it just they left it there, and being the scavengers that our parade committee is, we acquired it before my time. They went and they acquired it, and there was 2 of them, and they ended up making 1 wagon out of 2, and then still having to add some wood to it to restore it.
That's a really interesting piece. I've never seen one of those anywhere.
If you get down to Tombstone and go to the Tough Nut Mine down there, they have one that's parked there. It's really in dilapidated shape, but it's probably the sister of this one. From back down there in that territory. And so you've got behind you this big freight wagon. It was actually driven by women. So you had the Conestoga wagons more farther north, along the Oregon Trail. These were more used for down south. In fact, probably on the Oregon Trail they used these also. They're just bigger and beefier than the Conestogas. The Conestogas had a curved bottom to it so that they could pop off the wheels and float them down a river.
I was not aware of that fact either.
These, you probably couldn't. But if you take a look at this cross member, you talk about doing repairs out on the road. This is just nothing more than a branch that they took an axe and made it to fit, and then bolted it back on there again. And so, again,
I think this is probably one of the longest horse-drawn wagons I've ever seen. This one's probably 25 foot long, or better.
I think it's about 25.
It's about the same height and width and everything as what a normal prairie schooner or whatever would be, but the length on it is just phenomenal.
So women drove this. Men didn't. The kids would walk alongside and collect up wood, and there's usually a belly cloth that would be underneath it, sort of like the truck wagon had. And so they would pick up, manure or whatever they could for cooking, okay? The women drove. The men would be out on horseback in front, and they'd report to the wagon master, because the trail wasn't just one trail. They'd branch off. Everybody would say, well, I'm going to take this way, it's smoother. We're going to go around this or around that. So the men would go off and ride the different trails and come back and report back to the wagon master, who would then say, okay, ladies, we're going to go that way, because consensus says that that's the best way. And that's what he did. It was also called a school wagon, okay? And the reason why it was called a school wagon is because he traveled in schools like fish.
Oh.
Okay.
Okay.
So, that's why this has mislabeled. It's listed as a Conestoga, which it isn't, but it is truly a school wagon.
Cool.
So ladies can have fun driving that and go, yeah, it's just like the lady truck drivers nowadays. And that's,
so is this kind of the end of where we are?
We got one more building.
We still got one more building?
We got one more building.
Well, I've got to come back and take some pictures in this one.
Yeah, I'm at your disposal here. Okay, I'll let you guys go ahead and step out into the windy weather, and we're going to take the sidewalk off to the right there. So that reminds me, by shutting off the lights on you there, reminds me there's one time we had a group of school kids here, and they had like 3 buses worth of kids. And then one bus was like, we're short on our head count. We can't find a kid. We can't. In that wagon right there was a kid that had climbed up in there. It couldn't get out. All we could hear was, hello, hello. Help the little kid out. Yeah, the story that kid could tell, huh? So, it's okay. We're going to go into this next building here, and this is where all of our elegant coaches are.
The elegant coaches?
Yes.
I thought there were some of them in some of the... Oh, geez. Okay.
Okay.
This one's way cool.
So this particular... yeah, you can go ahead and close the door all the way. This particular room has the Brewsters in. You heard Andy talk about the Brewsters. The Brewster was a carriage company that had 2 guys by the name of Rolls and Royce. When they built their combustible drivetrain, combustible engine and drivetrain for the new horseless carriages that were coming out, they searched around the world to find a carriage company that had the same workmanship. And the Brewster Company out of New York was selected. So if you bought a Rolls Royce all the way up into the 1960s, it always had a plate on the front that says body by Brewster. Think back to Chevrolets back in the day. They don't do it anymore. It had a little
body by Fisher.
Body by Fisher. Same sort of thing. So you had Chevrolet, who built the combustible engine drivetrain, put it into the Fisher carriages. Okay. During that transition between carriages and horseless carriages.
Well, they were still doing that into the late 60s.
Right, they were.
Maybe even into the 70s.
Before the whole, everything happened with all the big motor companies.
Right.
So,
wow.
Anyways. So
but Mr. Rolls and Royce.
Yes.
I've never heard of them before.
Right, you haven't? No, I didn't think so. Yeah, they had some sort of like smart car business or something like that.
Yeah.
So this is a 2-wheel cart that's a Brewster carriage cart. And whenever we could, we got from the Brewster Company the complete build sheet on it, so you could see what was ordered. They're all custom built, just like Rolls Royces were. There's a build sheet that could be added to it.
Now, Brewster was making automobiles back in the 30s. Mm-hmm. They had one, I really loved the grill, I think, probably like on a 1938 or somewhere.
Right, we have a model of it over there.
Brewster that's just
They also made an aircraft, too.
Did they?
It was known as a flying coffin because it was the hardest thing to handle. It wasn't very... it wasn't built well. Let's put it that way. They needed to just stick with building automobiles and that. So this is a hack or a station wagon. The term station wagon comes from being able to go take people from a stage station or a train station to their hotel or wherever they were wanting to go to. Uber or whatever, Lyft from back in the day. This one here out of New York City even has a privacy glass that folds down. So the driver cannot hear the business dealings that were going on behind, because often the driver would try to get paid off by the competition of whoever they were calling to steal ideas. And then the Woody station wagons that we think of like in the 50s and that. Yeah. If you look at the size of these station wagons,
exactly the same.
Exactly. So,
yeah, these are carriages or buggies, is what they are. That they've got 2 sets of seats, and they look kind of like your normal buggy, all except these ones here are finished natural wood color.
Wood. No top to them.
No top. They've got some neat stairs going up, or steps.
Right.
and the sides of them are done in the panel pattern, like what you see on
style.
the
Right.
Bronson. Okay,
It's called Bronson style.
Okay.
So the two of these, when the Antiques Roadshow came through here about 15 years ago, they valued that one at about $3,500 plus the lamps, because the lamps were usually more than what the carriages were. And then this one here came in at about $1,300.
Okay. They don't look that much different.
This is a Chauncey Thomas Cadillac. This is a Brewster Rolls Royce.
Okay.
Name means everything. In fact, the Chauncey Thomas even has a couple of features on it that are better than what the Brewster has.
And what were they using for the lights? Carbide?
They started out using candles, and then they went to whale oil, then they went to another kind of oil, and then they eventually switched over to carbide in the 1900s, sort of like. But the lamps on all of the carriages are not used as headlights like we have today.
Right.
They're used to be seen, so that as you're coming in, most of the time people didn't ride their carriages at nighttime or drive them at nighttime, especially in the wood. If they did, it was in the city, but out in the country they wouldn't. But it was so that you could see, because you can see a candle a mile away.
Right.
And so when you can see them coming, they also doubled as your front door lights too for your house. So if you go to any big box store or lighting store and say, "Oh, I want a new front door light,"
Right.
You'll look in one area that'll be called carriage style lights. And the reason being is because you could take these lights and pop them right off of the little carrier here, take it and then put it right up by your front door light.
Okay. Yeah, and he just pulled the lamp out of a little holder on the side of the wagon, and you use the part that he pulled out on the bottom as your handle, and you could move it and put it at your house.
And that's why they always
How cool is that? And then you could see your walk as you went.
Exactly, that's your flashlight too.
There you go.
So yeah, one candle power flashlight. How many lumens is that? No LEDs.
Wow.
So we have a little Healy here. We have 3 of these that have. This one's kind of cute because it's got a parasol top. It's all wicker with red velvet. It's been restored beautifully.
Now Healy, did that change into the Austin Healy company?
There's another Healy company too. I was originally told that by the gentleman who this barn is named after. It's named after Stan Grimes, and he told me that it was part of the Austin Healy. As we did a little bit more research, we found out there's another Healy company that was Austin Healy. This is a different Healy, but they did high-end carriages also.
Okay.
Mostly sports cars, you might say.
Right.
So if you notice, this one is very sporty. The wheels actually, it's got what we call a cutout back here, so the wheels never rub the frame.
Right.
You can take your horse and you can spin and do donuts with this thing, and one back wheel will stand still.
Okay.
As it's spinning in circles.
And the front wheel won't hit, they
No,
always had places,
It goes, in fact, it'll turn even more than 90 degrees.
Wow.
Hey, Stan,
that's a neat feature.
Stan, what keeps it from tipping over? Well, there's something called a fifth wheel. I'm glad you asked that. There's something called a fifth wheel. Okay? We hear of it today, like for camp trailers and semis and that. But right here, this one's a little bit better visible. You've got 4 wheels on the ground, and your 5th wheel is right there.
Right.
That's a stabilizing feature, so when you turn, it doesn't tip over. So you've got that 5th wheel. You'll notice on some of them.
You've got your center point,
right?
Is what you've got to where it's triangular.
Such as that carriage right there has a full 5th wheel that goes all the way around. And some don't. It's just some of them make them half or sometimes 3/4, sometimes 1/3, and it's all because of the weight of the vehicle. You want to keep it as light as possible. And these you can just kind of push around, and they're real easy to roll.
Then you got a really nice display of
the carriage lamps.
Your carriage lamps.
Right.
Wow.
So you can see the different designs. Most of them have that long snout that comes out of the bottom.
Right.
That's used as a handle or also for mounting on your carriage. And those are often, like we mentioned earlier, a lot more expensive than what the carriages were, because they used silver a lot of times in there, and for a reflector. Reflector. It wasn't just nickel silver. Here's your Brewster automobile. Or no, this is a Packard. I'm sorry, this is a Packard. Brewster was a model. It was a model of the Packard. Okay.
Oh, so was it?
Yeah.
It was part of this. It was a
like a Ford Taurus.
Right.
Okay, or a Chevrolet Malibu. Packard had the Brewster, so it was a model of it.
Okay.
So, and then.
But the grill that I saw started out high and then came way out in front with a big curve on it.
Oh yeah, I got to look that one up.
I'll have to show it to you when we're done with the podcast, because it's pretty neat.
So behind you here is, before we go any farther, there's right here. This is your tire shop from back in the day. So you take the wheel off of your carriage, mount it up here on the hub. We've got these rubber strips basically.
Yeah.
They come rolled up in a big spool. You feed wires through these.
Oh, they ran wires.
They ran wires through there. This is last time they purchased this was about $13 a foot. I imagine it's double that by now. And so what you do is you measure your rubber so that it's twice this. It's 2 spokes farther than the circumference of your tire.
Right.
Okay, wheel. And I'll explain why in a little bit. So what you do is you feed the wires through here.
Right.
You soap it up and feed it through, and then the wires come up through here into these, and you bend them around into these things. The rubber is then held back by these clamps here. Okay, these 2 little dogs that come out. As you ratchet like this, it tightens up the wires until it's really tight. Then you weld or braze the 2 wires together, snip them off, hammer it down tight, take your wheel off, and you bounce it on the ground. And you keep bouncing it.
And then that rubber shuts up.
Yes, literally. Shut up. So the reason why we have it farther is because now you don't need any glue.
Right.
Because the rubber's trying to expand all the time and push against each other to make up those 2 spokes. And so
I always wondered how they got that rubber on those wagon wheels.
Yeah. So a couple more Brewster carts here. We've got then old man Brewster, when he passed away, he had the company went to his son, and his son continued building this. We call this our Maureen O'Hara coach because it was used by Maureen O'Hara in several movies filmed at Old Tucson. The glass windshield is missing because they took it out so they could film her without getting glare, and we have no idea what happened to it. Same thing with the vanity that was inside there.
Wow.
So, the other one was built by Brewster's other son, who started the J.B. Brewster Company, who was a competing Brewster company. So in a car, you've got a dashboard.
Right.
This we have a dashboard. This one we have a dash. It's made out of leather.
Okay.
This is a dashboard.
And the dash sits up in front of the driver.
Right. It's to keep anything from the backside, the horse to deflect it off, to dash off of it. So in a car, we have a dashboard.
Right.
Okay. When they started putting combustible engines in, they needed a fuel gauge and a speedometer. They couldn't mount it to a dash.
Which is made out of
leather.
Yeah.
So they mounted it to the dashboard. That's where the term dashboard came from.
Okay.
For ladies, what they had was underneath the seat of and we're looking at a nice little fancy carriage that you'd find from the very wealthy people. Underneath the dash here, or underneath the seat there, is a big box area, and the women actually would have a box in there that carried 4 pairs of gloves. 2 pairs of white, 2 pairs of black, 2 pairs were long, 2 pairs were short. Okay, so you had a variety depending upon the event you were going to. It was in a box about 6 inches wide, about 3 inches thick or high, and about 18 inches long. That's where the term glove box comes from.
Okay.
We think that cars are fancy now because you have the little mirror that flips down that has lighting on it. This coach actually has, and they have an exact one like this up in Cardston, Alberta, Canada at the Remington Museum. It's actually got a mirror that slides down there with a triple beveled mirror, and that with a candle that sits there. Women never put on their faces or fixed themselves up before they went to an event like they do now. Think about traveling through dusty roads, whatever, and then getting our heat here in Arizona.
Right.
You finally get to the location. So what would happen was the gentleman would step out and notice that there's a cover actually even on the steps.
How cool is that?
That's so that the bottom of your feet don't get dirty, so you don't track it into your opera or music, melodrama, whatever you're going to see, or you wouldn't carry it into your carriage. So the gentleman would step out, close this up. The ladies then would close the curtains all the way around, and then put on their face, fix their hair, put on their hats. And when she opened up the curtains, there was a signal to the gentleman to open up the door, help her out, and now they could go. And then they would let the chauffeur, who's riding up on top, or their dicky, drive off with it. So
wow. This stair cover that he's talking about actually attaches to the door. So when the door opens up, you've got your clean step, and when the door closes, the cover comes back over the step into the buggy.
And this one here,
how cool is that?
Of course, competition has even something better. Wait, why is it not working? There we go.
Oh.
So if you want to let your, it's kind of stiff right now, but if you want to let your chauffeur know that you want to stop, you just pull a little knob there and it rings the bell. So, this one here has the green velvet in.
Wow.
Sure, you bet.
This is just too neat.
So, and the windows do go up and down. They've got these like straps. You
Right.
pull the thing up and you hook it up and then let the things down for circulation. This one, you notice that the windows go up and down in the front. This one here had 4 windows that slid side to side.
Now, do these ones run in the parade also, or are these just on display?
They normally do. You know what? I see there's some cardboard here, which means they're going to start greasing it. So it may run in the parade.
Wow.
Already?
Then you've got just a couple of really
there's
nice...
sports cars, yes.
Yeah.
So they've got something in the back, talking about various things that have transferred from an automobile, or from carriages to the automobiles.
Right.
Okay, this one ladies would really love to hear about. This little seat back here was known as the mother-in-law seat. And the reason why it was called a mother-in-law seat is most of the time they would take the bonnet off, or a lot of times they'll have it so that the bonnet folds up like back there.
Right.
That one has a mother-in-law seat too. That one was actually given to the city of Tucson by Andrew Carnegie.
Oh, really?
In 1901 when they built the Carnegie Free Library downtown.
Wow.
And it was down in the basement of that building and filled with pack rats and stuff until we got a hold of it and restored it. So going back to the little seat back here, if you got engaged, your first year or during your whole engagement, one of your mothers would have to escort you on every date you went on. So she drove from back here. What looks like handles on the side. She drove from back there. So what looks like handles here are not handles. That's where the lines go through. Okay,
wow.
You'll notice it on all of them there. So the one back there, the Carnegie, even has a loop on the dashboard so that the lines go through there to help guide it straight. The other one over there does too, the little wicker one. So then once you got married, the first year of marriage, one of your mothers would have to ride with you, back here to make sure that you're starting off your marriage properly. Alrighty? That's why it's called a mother-in-law seat. Have you ever heard of the term backseat driver?
Oh, yeah.
The person in the back telling you what to do, that's where the term backseat driver came from.
And let me explain this buggy a little bit more. We've got 2 of them here.
Yeah, this is a Brewster Spider.
This looks basically like what everybody calls the doctor's buggy. Mm-hmm. And it's got the leather bonnet that comes up over the top. And there is a seat that sits on the back that doesn't really have any armrests, doesn't really look like it would be comfortable to sit in at all. And it'd be probably pretty easy to get bucked out of. But mother-in-law had to sit on that back seat and drive, not being able to see. I don't see how mother-in-law could even see because there's not even a window in that.
They would probably take the top off of this one. This is like after you're married. If you wanted to go on a date by yourselves without your chauffeur or dicky driving, okay, because your chauffeur would drive from back here. Or this would have a little window in it. So I don't know why this one doesn't have a snap up like that one. Yeah, or like the other one.
Maybe that was where the phrase "driving blind" came from.
Probably.
Holy smokes! Yeah. Okay, so that's a bit of buggy history I had no clue about.
And I didn't know about that until I was up in Canada at a carriage museum, and they told me about that. Behind you here is our centerpiece. This is kind of like our fanciest coach of all. This was owned by Maximilian, the Emperor of Mexico. It was actually commissioned by Napoleon. And if you notice, it was built in Paris, France, shipped over to Mexico for Napoleon. This is Napoleon and Carlotta's everyday coach, you might say. It wasn't their parade coach. Their parade coach is actually in Mexico City in the Capitol building, from what I understand. But it was usually used by the mayor in all of our parades. And then one year, coming around the corner here, the team of horses that was pulling a wagon behind him slipped on the fake brick in the middle of the street there and went to tumble, which spooked the other horse. They bolted, and the driver had a choice of going to the left, plowing into a couple hundred people, going to the right, plowing into a couple hundred people, or taking out the mayor. He figured there's only 2 people, the mayor and his wife, versus a couple hundred people. So he went straight, trying to slow down his horses, and plowed it right through, the back end of this carriage. And Mayor Murphy, he's passed away since then, but he used to come in here. He loved to tell the story about just seeing the horse's hooves going over the top of my head and that tongue coming right between my wife and I, And he's always dramatic about it. He was a great storyteller about it.
Wow.
And so then, because of the historic significance of it, we had it shipped back to Bird in Hand, Pennsylvania, and the Amish had rebuilt it, and it cost a few tens of thousands of dollars to
have. It's a fantastic looking piece.
It's in mint condition right now. So everything was all
So it's not parade going anymore.
The only people that can ride in this are people that are on our committee for 50 years. When they celebrate their 50th year on our committee, and we have one member still alive who's celebrated, that's about 2 or 3 years ago, celebrated his 50th anniversary with our parade. We have a lot of people that are on the parade committee that basically, once you're on, the pride and the history of keeping all of this running is in your blood, and we have several people that have been on 35, 40 years.
Wow.
You know, and I'm one of the young guys on here, and I've been on for a little less than 10 years. But, you know, a lot of organizations, you know, having somebody on a committee for 20 years is kind of hard. Around here, that's nothing. And so the windows, let's just kind of explain this. It's an all-black coach. It's got a black leather at the top that actually folds open and opens up. If you notice these curved things, you notice them like on the side of hearses for decoration, or the old Brome coaches that they had. The reason why they call them Bromes is Brome opens up. There's 2 knobs up on the top that unlatch, and then you fold this open so it's an open carriage.
An open carriage, or else you can close it up.
Close up for inclement weather. The beveled glass windows in here are lead crystal.
Wow.
Okay, so this isn't a cheap, you know, run-of-the-mill automobile type of thing, you know, or carriage. It does have the step cover on it.
Yes, it does.
And the polished brass trim.
Wow.
All of the hand-painted pinstriping on here. It's got the Mexican seal with the Mexican eagle on it and the snake. It's got the patent leather fenders so that it doesn't make a lot of noise.
Wow. And this is just a beautiful piece. Wow. Amazing.
It is.
And then we get the hearse. I always love hearse.
Right. This is a white hearse, and the reason why it's white is because it's a children's hearse. It's 1/3 smaller than an adult hearse. Adult hearses were black and very, very, very fancy. The children's hearses were smaller, and if you notice by looking in the back window, you'll see what they call stops. There's several stops because it went from infant all the way up to about the age of 10 or 11 when you started going out and apprenticing, and that you were considered an adult back in those days. In Tucson, in 1800, 1 child out of 10 would see their 10th birthday. 9 out of 10 would pass away before they saw their 10th birthday.
Really?
In 1900, 5 out of 10 would see their birthday. So I just went with with an archaeologist here in Tucson back last October, investigating, he's showing me around where the cemetery is. There's actually houses built on it right now. It's called the Court Street Cemetery here in Tucson. And somebody was digging for a new mailbox post, and they hit wood down there, and they knew they were on a cemetery. So of course the archaeologist has to come in. It was a child approximately the age of 3 years old, and it had a perfect imprint in the forehead, right above the eyes of a horse hoof. Yeah. And so it was like instant death for that little child. So when we have children's groups come through, like tomorrow we're going to have 110 kids coming through, I usually stop when we talk about the mortality rate and then say, you know, many of you, you know, get to see your 10th birthday, and aren't you glad you're living today? You know, what are some of the other things that they might have died from? You know, and, you know, disease, you know, falling out of a tree, just an infection. They didn't know about stuff that we have nowadays. You know, childbirth, you know, was, you know, the moms and the child usually died. You know, it wasn't uncommon for that back then.
Yeah, it's amazing. So was that nationwide? Do you think the mortality rates were that high, or did Tucson have different factors going?
That I don't know. I couldn't answer you that. I wish I knew, but I really don't know. But that's what I had read. I was going through some stuff in the Historical Society, and happened to just come across this mortality rate thing, and I went, oh, wow. And that was before I even came on the parade committee. That was several years ago. I was like, that's
unbelievable.
Scary, kind of, you know. So,
wow.
The harness that you see. Well, here's an example of what that coach right there looked like after the accident.
Oh,
you can see how it got torn up. You know, so
they did a beautiful job of the re-restoration of it, though.
They did.
And is this the harness?
And that's the harness that came with it.
Wow, how ornate.
It was being used by the governor of Sonora, Mexico, which is a state that's just south of Pima County here, or Santa Cruz County too. Sonora Mexico, their state. Anyways, the governor didn't like it anymore because he wanted to ride in a combustible engine limousine instead of in a carriage. So some businessmen in Tucson acquired it, and then it was passed on to the parade committee, and that's all of the original harness from back in the day.
Wow, okay.
It's pretty ornate.
It is. It's really ornate.
We do have the Tournament of Roses coming to be in our parade this year, and they're going to be riding in that little highboy. It's actually a hunting coach. This is another landau that can fold open. You can see here how this thing is kind of like a Rubik's Cube. Okay, these posts fold in. You can see the cracks.
These are wooden posts going up to the roof, and the wooden posts fold in where the windshield would be.
Right. So and this one here folds back
over the door.
Right. Or if you wanted to open up a window, you flap these up, the guides, and pull your window up out of the door.
Okay.
Alrighty. So and then again, there's a latch right there up in the center of like where your dome light would be, right, say in your car. You undo the latch, and then this whole thing unfolds open also.
Wow.
Yeah, so this was actually, again, here goes history, and you don't know how true it is. It was supposed to be used by one of the Dalton brothers in a robbery in Arkansas, and he got caught.
Oh, really?
And so when I bring students through here, I go, why do you think he got caught? Okay, he's trying to get away in a horse-drawn limousine. Would you jump in a limousine or would you jump on a motorcycle nowadays to try to get away? They go, motorcycle. Yeah, wouldn't you rather jump on a horse as opposed to a carriage and try to get away? You just robbed a bank? He wasn't very smart.
Well, this one wouldn't be real identifiable either, right? No, I mean, it'd be like jumping in a Rolls Royce.
Exactly, yes.
It's not like anybody'd know who you were.
Yeah, this is a nice cream-colored one with the eagle with the, its arrows in its talons on the side. So, yeah, it's kind of interesting. Then we've got another Studebaker. This is just basically a little freight wagon that we've got here. That's been totally restored. And that takes you through what we call our buggy barn.
Okay. Well, Stan, I really appreciate you taking us through your museum, talking to us about your parade. This has been fascinating. The backstories have been awesome.
Yeah.
And
don't forget the north end of the Adobe building where we started before we went on the air.
Okay.
With the train layout down there, there's about $10,000 worth of train equipment there. The locomotive alone is worth $5,000 because it's an exact replica. If you go down to the Transportation Museum downtown, that same locomotive that we have a model of is parked down there, totally restored downtown.
Okay. I'll have to take a look at that, but I need to wrap this one up.
No.
So I so appreciate your time. I appreciate you spending it with us and explaining all of this. It has been absolutely awesome. If anybody is anywhere in the Tucson area, you need to hit Tucson for museums. If you want to see museums, Tucson's really the place. Right. And this one here is one not to miss. And I finish out my podcast by saying the world is full of wonder.
It is.
People, get out there and explore, learn some things, see some things, do some things, and have an absolutely wonder-filled day.
All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?